keeps happening. I keep falling down these stairs. There's nothing I can do about it. But on the other hand, Pangoro is pretty cool, so I can't complain too much. In case the metaphor wasn't laid out clearly enough, I've been playing a lot of Pokémon games lately because the brain rot subsumed, so I must create a video about games once more. Funnily enough, there was a good couple of years where I just wasn't all that interested in the series. I got Pokémon Sword when it first came out, and it took me 2 years to smoke that joint. Not because I didn't enjoy my time with it, mind you, I just wanted to play other games, I guess. But none of that matters now, since I am a certified Poké Freak, and, well, I'm gonna talk about the stuff I've been up to in these games recently, and more general thoughts I have about them. Sometimes I accidentally go to Bulbapedia when looking for the definitions of actual words. And with that said, lately I've been playing Pokemon Green version, both on emulator and even real hardware, of which I prefer the latter because of the portable context or some esoteric shit like that. Something I've always overlooked in the earlier games was the game corner, that one place with the banger BGM and the gaming. It's called the game corner for a reason. The mechanics of the slot machines always eluded me. How do you even get actual winnings if it's seemingly always rigged against you? You can purchase coins directly if you want to get those prizes, but it's way too expensive to get enough coins for even the cheapest prize. The exclusive TMs and Pokemon would taunt me for years. Every time I passed by the game corner, I wondered what having an early game for Teeny would be like, or really just about anything with the Porygon line. But when I got to Celadon during my latest playthrough, I had an idea. What if I kept trying? I mean, in the international version of Pokemon Blue and Green, Porygon is only 6,500 coins and not the cap of 9,999, so... And then I became a gaming addict. Somehow I wasn't already over the edge yet. As opposed to real life, there's a way to get winnings from slot machines, though it's kinda weird. Something to do with one of the machines being given better odds than the rest. You really gotta stick with it for the long haul, even if you lose a couple times along the way. I started going for Porygon when I had just 3 badges, and when I finally reached the 6,500 coin threshold, I had 8 badges. I already beat Giovanni and was about to head towards Victory Road when I finally got Porygon. So about 3 to 4 hours in total. It might have been more. Was it worth it? Maybe. Quick aside, I'd love it if they'd bring back the game corner. Something just hits different about gaming all your coins away to the 6 beats known to man. But obviously, since they can't bring back the slots, here's an idea. Pinball. Like Pokemon pinball. Anyways, so the Porygon thing. Once I finally got it, it was at level 18 when the rest of my team was around level 40, so I needed to manifest a few more levels from somewhere. I'll be honest, I'm really not familiar enough with Gen 1 to know the best spots to grind, so I ended up going between Victory Road, Route 16, etc. That also took an hour or two. One of the places I ended up stopping by was the Pokemon Tower, because you can infinitely full heal your party by standing in this one spot, which I got plenty of mileage out of when I was rematching the trainers in that room. So to clarify, this isn't the actual Pokemon Green. It's a ROM hack called Shin Pokemon Green that makes some small improvements like being able to rematch trainers and other additions. But in most cases, it's just the original game. Besides the early 2010s era fake creepypasta bullshit that isn't real.
If you go into this very specific grass tile on Route 69, you'll find the secret house Pokemon that will make you piss yourself and cry. Because it's the house from the real-life Lavender Town in Japan! Ooh!
Jokes aside, I still low-key enjoy that kind of stuff when the stories aren't being weird about other cultures or weird about things in general in that early 2010s internet way. It's what it's... But about that, creepypasta thing. One of the more underappreciated things in these games is the pedestrian dialogue, which I'll admit is typically quite dry and not particularly interesting. But even as far back as Red and Green, there is something more going on beneath the surface. Generation 1's fictionalized Kanto is a strange but cool place with memorable locales. You've got things like the Cycling Road, Viridian Forest, the Safari Zone, and all sorts of both natural and urban environments that are equally good set pieces as much as they are a fucking vibe. Monochromaticity be damned. I really dig Saffron City as the region's big intersection point, a place you could end up passing through before Erica, just by extension of the more non-linear nature of the mid-game. There isn't really a good reason to do so that early on, besides making traveling just a bit more convenient. I mean, what other place in the series has 2 gyms asterisk? Don't answer that. And just north of Saffron is Cerulean City, the city surrounded by a mysterious blue aura. I guess that explains the 3 hidden rare candies in some guy's backyard. And just right next to it is... oh my god, the spooky lavender place or whatever, I don't know. When you get here in a playthrough, you'll quickly find out that Team Rocket's up to some real shady stuff near the Pokémon Tower, a burial ground for deceased Pokémon. Even in the face of the battle mechanics referring to Pokémon as fainted when their HP drops to 0, the game still wants to make it clear that yes, Pokémon are mortal creatures like the rest of us, and can die. Well, for the most part anyways. If you head over to the Pokémon Tower immediately, you can get through most of it and battle the possessed trainers along the way, but you'll be blocked by a scripted encounter with yet another ghost saying, "Begone. Intruders. Get out. Get out." You can't get past it without the Sylph Scope, so you'll need to return here later. Once you obtain it, all the wild ghost forms are revealed, including the one you'll always meet as you climb your way to the final floor. Once encountered, it's shown to be a Marowak. If you talk to the young girl inside the Pokémon Center, you might already realize who this really is. It's the Marowak that was killed by Team Rocket, alongside the other wild ghost Pokémon. Interestingly enough, it's the only one that can't be caught. It must be defeated in battle. They may not be reawakening ancient beasts to bring forth natural disaster, or playing with time and space itself to create a new world, or other highly powerful chaotic forces of nature, but Team Rocket still does really terrible things, just on a less fantastical, more grounded level. They steal Pokémon from trainers, they hijack the headquarters of Silphco, they possibly poach rare Pokémon from the Safari Zone, and as I said earlier, they sometimes kill Pokémon. But what is their motivation for doing all this? Are they just cartoonish villains doing bad things for the sake of being bad? Well, it's hard to deny the first half with some of the grunts, but the real answer is pretty simple. Money and power. Team Rocket seeks to profit any way they can, no matter how unethical it may be, and that motive alone adds a lot of weight to even their most petty actions, and I don't know, that makes them feel pretty real to me, compounded by how their presence permeates throughout Kanto. They aren't the bad guys in this world. They're just a facet of this world out of many others, an organization formed by a corrupt man from a corrupt system. Even after Team Rocket is disbanded, the Rocket Game Corner remains open, and still offers Pokémon as prizes, serving a double purpose as a way for the player to still obtain Porygon to complete the dex, and as a reminder that the system that led to Team Rocket's formation continues to persist. That's some real heavy shit, I'm not gonna lie. After calming the spirit of the deceased Marowak, you make your way up the stairs to the final floor, where you face a gauntlet of Team Rocket's goons. Once defeating them all, you'll come across someone standing at the end of the hall. This person is Mr. Fuji, an elderly man who takes care of orphaned and abandoned Pokémon in his home, acting as a sanctuary for them. He actually voluntarily came to the tower to ease the spirit of the Marowak, nothing to do with Team Rocket or anything. Just an overall compassionate guy with an unconditional appreciation for the strange and wonderful creatures in this world. Something conveyed really well through what little dialogue he has, in addition to word of mouth from other people around there. I want to briefly touch on some other Pokemon things that are... Forget it. I'm not even going to try explaining it. I'm going to talk about whatever the hell as a fun little grab bag intermission of sorts. Something I really value in these games is interactivity. Can you sit on this bench? Yes. Yes, you can. There's no benefit or drawback to doing so. You can simply be there. It's not just going from point A to point B and so on. There is, to some extent, a world here. One that isn't solely for pushing the story forward, but with optional, useless mechanics. Secret bases feel to me like the pinnacle of useless mechanics, or maybe just a permutation of the broader idea. Using secret power on certain environmental details opens a hole to a small natural alcove, which you can hang out and decorate to your heart's content. It's similar to how you could decorate your bedroom in gold, silver, and crystal. Why deal with boring adult paperwork when you could hide away with your plush dolls of your favorite pocket monsters in Route 119? It's not like the National Tax Agency has the HM for waterfall or anything. Actually, speaking of, Route 119's gotta be one of the most... Well, to refrain from using that one word, I'll just say it's one of my favorite routes. Everything from the rain pouring down throughout to the acro and mock bike paths, the utterly deranged Feebas stuff, and really the general layouts flow from bottom to top. The taller grass may be annoying because it slows you down, but ironically that's sort of what makes it memorable as one of the many unique characteristics of this part of the region. Though Route 119 stands out to me specifically because of its naturalistic design and general first impressions, of course. If you really find the tall grass to be too annoying, you can technically get rid of it with cut. Can't say that about the mud or snow. Also, Tropius is there. Hi, Tropius! And man, Legends Arceus is such a game, dog. I feel like just Jubilife Village has enough to be a game on its own, and yet there is more game to be played. Every person you come across is named, your character will look at points of interest, almost every single building is enterable. All those things and more really bring this world to life. It's challenging to single out any one interesting element of this game because everything is so fucking poignant and thorough, even by Pokemon standards. It's the kind of game with small details you only notice 30 hours in. 30 hours after you finish the main story, in my case. But if I were to mention a couple of things, I like how in spite of the story context, there are still Pokemon that are totally passive towards humans even when spotted. Just little guys who don't really mind either way. The requests are yet another way the game fleshes out its world, especially within Jubilife Village, even if the gameplay of a lot of them comes down to walking from this place to that place, and then that other place. That one Mr. Mime request treads the fine line between the diegetic way of this world and utterly baffling gameplay interactions in just the right way. I can't wait for the Gengar request in Legend Zetoe to give an in-universe explanation for why real-time shadows fade away at a distance. Honestly, the main gameplay loop of catching Pokemon isn't super amazing. It actually got a bit stale later into the main story, but everything else from the atmosphere to the sound design is so on point, it's like, shit man, Legends Arceus might be that sort of game. Great music too. Number out of numerical scale, as some might put it. You know how it's stated in various Pokédex entries that Nosepass usually faces north? This is the first time that's actually depicted in-game, in the mainline series at least. Just to give an idea of the lengths Legends Arceus can go towards for attention to detail that no one besides me and I guess 5 other people will notice. Okay, these games sell millions, so maybe it's a couple more people than that, but regardless, I personally appreciate that. Why is there a first-person mode when you hold ZL? Subjectively, why the hell not? Maybe not as interesting as a full-blown photo mode, but there's some fun to be had with it. It's pretty cool that Midnight Crick got a starring role as one of the game's catchable Pokemon. YouTuber collaborations in the series are incredibly uncommon, so it's neat to see here, especially with a smaller creator like him. At the same time, I hate Pikachu. Maybe you could say it's in character that time and time again, it refused to save my pinballs from falling despite being fully able to. But I can't help but still feel unreasonably pissed at the rat creature. Fuck you, Pikachu. So, I think it's about time I finally say it. No more beating around the bush. My favorite Pokemon has gotta be Gengar. Or well, one of my favorites, anyway. Hard to beat Pangoro's Bancho Furry Smoke Grass energy. But I can't lie, there's just something about Gengar. It's just kind of a silly, mischievous guy. If you've been a regular viewer of this channel, which statistically I know you haven't, you might have seen the clip at the very end of my Small Chill Game Worlds video. That was from my playthrough of Pokemon Soul Silver I started a few days before releasing that video. I wanted to use Gengar on my team, but was then hit with the crushing reality of not having anyone IRL to trade with. Hunter only evolves into Gengar when traded, so no trading means no Gengar. There isn't any way to obtain Gengar through in-game trade either, not in Johto, Kanto, and certainly not fucking Sinnoh. Though you could insert one of the GBA games into the DS's GBA slot to get Gengar as a wild encounter in Sinnoh's old chateau. But we aren't Sinnohing, we're Johtoing. So I compromised on using Misdreavus instead, just to have some ghost type on my team. Its stats aren't too bad, but I use the Pokemon on my team more for the vibes than any statistical power advantage. But it does help when it can actually hold its weight in more challenging battles. But once I got to the Indigo Plateau, it became clear that my ragtag team of level 35 freaks might not be able to handle the Elite Four, so things would have to change. Hell, even as early as the 8th gym had me reconsidering my team build. But now I kinda had no choice, as someone not the best at making up for my Pokemon's shortcomings. I considered bringing a Dragonair onto my team, and then Pupitar, but because of their high level requirement for their final evolution, I wouldn't be able to get the most out of them. After many hours of real-time grinding, I got my whole team to around level 40, and while that certainly helped even the odds a bit, it still wasn't enough to even make it to Lance, just to give a frame of reference for how fucked I truly was. So what the hell am I gonna do now? Well, there's one other thing I could try. The global trade system. But how do you even access the GTS a full decade after the Nintendo DS and Wii's online servers shut down? To put it simply, a lot of complicated shit that involves fan servers, DNS wizardry, Wi-Fi connections without security, and a lot of patience. After jumping through all those hoops, and accidentally stumbling onto completely unrelated online features, I was finally able to connect to the GTS. I first tried looking for a Miss Magius because you can't evolve Misdreavus before the post-game in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but no dice on it, or even its pre-evolution. Then I set my eyes on Haunter, and sure enough, I managed to find one, with the only Pokemon asked for in return being a Haunter at any level. Okay, that shouldn't be too hard, right? So, there's two places you can catch a Ghastly in Soul Silver, in Sprout Tower or the Safari Zone. There's also Bell Tower, but that isn't available before the post-game in Soul Silver, which obviously wasn't an option for me. It also needs to be night when you're playing, which, thankfully for me, it was. Only one slight issue. The highest level you can find a wild Ghastly at is level 17 in the Safari Zone, and in Sprout Tower that goes all the way down to level 6. By the way, Ghastly evolves into Hunter at level 25. Christ. And as you're probably already aware if you're this deep into this video, Johto is pretty infamous for having a pretty low level curve, meaning the strongest Pokemon you could battle at this point in the game are at most level 36, but more commonly hovering around the early 30s. There just isn't that much EXP going around in these games, even if you do the occasional trainer rematches you might receive, assuming you even got their number in the first place, which I did. Even with the less active fan-hosted servers, the GTS is still inherently malleable, so I'd rather not waste god knows how many hours getting Ghastly to evolve, only for the listing to disappear. But I had one more card up my sleeve, and actually, it's just the Safari Zone again. There is something else you can find there, disregarding weird post-game mechanics that aren't relevant, and that's Haunter. And in the same area as Ghastly as well. The only catch is that its encounter rate is a bit low at 20%, and it's in the Safari Zone. So I imported my save into an emulator and created a save state when I found Haunter so I could RNG manipulate a guaranteed I guess that wasn't necessary. And after all of that, and accidentally going to the wrong part of the map, I was finally able to trade over my level 17 Haunter across the world and receive the newly evolved Thanatos in return. You can't change the nicknames of traded Pokemon, which makes me glad that name goes as hard as it does. With the assistance of the traded Pokemon EXP boost, I quickly got Thanatos to the same level range as the rest of my team, and maybe a little past that by accident. And thanks to some insane luck, I was able to score a victory against Lance after all my other Pokemon fainted, thanks to Thanatos the MVP surviving a blizzard from Dragonite at just 2 HP. So maybe it wasn't too overleveled after all. As much as us loners might not want to admit, being able to trade Pokemon is a core part of this series, as well as the real-life social aspect in general, even if it or the other multiplayer mechanics are never required to finish the game's main story. It's sorta like a secondary storyline running in parallel to the main one, shaped by the actions you take in this world as the player, I guess. If I didn't get that Gengar trade from the GTS, it probably would have taken me a lot longer to finish the game. That 1.5 times EXP boost for traded Pokemon especially goes a long way for this game in particular. And yeah, I could have traded the Haunter between my own save file on an emulator, or done this or that, and it would have been way easier. But I think engaging with the game's intended mechanics on some level is just more fun in this case. Does that come off pedantic? Well, yes, I am a pedant after all. Like how Haunter's base stats really aren't significantly worse than Gengar's. I just wanted to use Gengar, because Gengar's the cooler one. Pokemon! Yeah. Yeah. After surfing down Pallet Town's shore, you soon reach Cinnabar Island, one of the region's smaller communities and the only town entirely surrounded by ocean, so don't expect paved streets or anything like that. One of the more notable spots in Cinnabar is the Pokémon Mansion, the old, decrepit building in the top left. There's the gym, of course, but there's also and I've just named half of the buildings in Cinnabar. There's probably more going on in a place like this than what we end up seeing in game, I think. Anyhow, the Pokemon Lab is where they research the funny guys or whatever. But most importantly, you can finally do something with the fossil you obtained back in Mount Moon and or the Pewter Museum if you stop by there, and straight up resurrect the thing. My god, technology truly is incredible. Isn't it kinda strange there are so many places in Kanto simply named Pokemon blank that basically have nothing to do with each other? I guess when you're just making a game and not building off the continuity of a well-defined expansive world, you don't tend to think too hard about trivial things like location names. Near the entrance, and also in one other room, there's a hung-up portrait of the lab's founder, Dr. Fuji. He's not actually present here though, but it's a nice little detail. For such minor areas, this game really likes to add just enough things to get the cogs turning, at least to the freak currently speaking. On the flip side, the Pokemon Mansion exemplifies that aspect in a more unusual way. As evident by the rubble and collapsed floor tiles inside, it burned down, or at least partially so, for some reason. Strange burglars and scientists roam the building, the former surprisingly having nothing to do with Team Rocket as far as I know, and the latter So, there are mechanisms built into statues that control access to certain rooms, similarly to the Silphco office building. There are also certain rooms that contain journals, the writings within being from an unspecified group of researchers. Diary, July 5th, Guyana, South America. A new Pokémon was discovered deep in the jungle. Diary, July 10th. We christened the newly discovered Pokémon, Mew. 7 months passed. Diary, February 6th. Mew gave birth. We named the newborn Mewtwo. Nearly 7 more months passed before the written date of the final entry. Diary, September 1st. Mewtwo is far too powerful. We have failed to curb its vicious tendencies. If it wasn't made clear enough by the old man outside outright saying so, the Pokémon Mansion was used as a ground for biological experimentation on Pokémon, and still is to some extent. The Mew research seen in those journal entries was just another one of those experiments. Something I'd like to point out is that in the original Japanese version of the games, the singular watashi pronoun is used, implying they're written from the perspective of one person. So that's interesting. But by that point, the story's basically over. You get the key from the mansion to unlock the Cinnabar's gym, you head straight to Viridian's and take down Team Rocket for good in a surprise match against the gym leader, Giovanni, and then work your way towards becoming the champion at the Indigo Plateau. All the stuff about Mew and the experiments never amount to anything. You could say it adds to the mystique, that they're so elusive they practically only exist in writing. But when a major sub-goal of the game is to complete the Pokédex, it feels a bit unsatisfying from a narrative perspective to not even get a glimpse at either of those Pokémon. Not to mention that, disregarding any future remakes and ROM hacks, there's literally no post-game. Which is understandable, but nevertheless, it still bothers me. When was that cave accessible? For the longest time, I was never aware of Mewtwo's full context within this game's story. I mean, sure, everyone knows about the Pokémon Mansion journals, but the way seemingly unrelated plot threads come together piece by piece, forming a darker underside to the main story which nevertheless permeates throughout a playthrough until reaching a natural climax to those who were already curious enough to look deeper in the first place, or those just trying to complete the Pokédex. Or, to put it another way, it's kind of like a real-life creepypasta, right? Well, real life as in it exists, not that Mewtwo is real or anything, I'd hope. And barring the tendency to lack subtlety in those stories of the ruined childhood type. To my knowledge, Mr. Fuji is never outright stated as being the same person as Dr. Fuji. Dr. Fuji is never outright stated as having any involvement with the Pokémon Mansion or Mewtwo's creation, and Mewtwo is never explicitly shown to have any relation with that one blocked-off cave in Cerulean, until you meet it there. But it's hard not to make those connections. Hell, the various adaptations go out of their way to make those connections clearer. They have a strange inclination towards involving Team Rocket in the Mew stuff, which I still don't know what to make of. Does it add depth, or does it just make the world feel smaller and shallower? I'm not sure I'm invested enough to care either way. Mr. Fuji potentially playing a direct part in the creation of Mewtwo makes his character so much more interesting than just being the caring old man in Lavender Town. I doubt he was acting out of pure malice, but he definitely has that baggage. Probably what drove him to retiring and sheltering abandoned Pokemon at his home, to be honest. Red and Green's down-to-earth story compounded by bits and pieces of world building alluding to something much more complex is really what makes it work for me. Team Rocket, Lavender Town, Mr. Fuji, Seldon's Game Corner, the truck, things like that. It really captures how your understanding of the world develops as you grow older. You begin to see how complex things really are. And it goes without saying, but the Mewtwo storyline is sort of the culmination of the game's themes. Maybe not urbanization specifically, but more broadly human interference with nature, and how there is balance to be found, or something like that. You could even say Mewtwo is the true final boss of the game, and it technically is to a degree, but it's also fitting from a narrative standpoint, as a creature synthesized by mankind with such great power that it seemingly left destruction in its wake, afterwards banishing itself to the depths of Cerulean Cave on its own accord. Of course, that's just how I interpret what happened. Beyond what is presented directly through dialogue, the game leaves a lot up to imagination, and that's fine. In the years since Red and Green first came out, the series has infamously shifted towards more dialogue-heavy storytelling, pushing its characters to the forefront, and that's also fine. In fact, the latest mainline releases, Scarlet and Violet, have become one of my favorite stories in the whole series. How they take so many conventional Pokemon tropes and flip them on their head, re-examining them through an entirely new, captivating lens. But Red and Green isn't just the rudimentary foundation for future games to make something out of, or just for the elements of. It is something of its own, if that makes sense. Scarlet and Violet, Black and White, or whatever game story most personally resonated with you didn't come from nowhere. It has value. It is something. And there is something about Pokemon in particular. Maybe you don't quite get what it is. And maybe that's fine. Honestly, I don't really get it either. But that's almost part of the fun, right? Pokemon is special in that regard. It's why you're hearing background music from a nearly decade-old game. It's why I wanted to do all this in the first place. It's also compelling to me, so I thought that'd be fun to share, at the very least. What a strange game series, right?